Ladies, what's the most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to you on a date? So, I went on a date last night to a swanky Asian fusion restaurant with a guy I like. The lights were dim and every table was romantically lit with candlelight. We were having a good time over our main course and chatting away, when all of a sudden, I noticed a bright light coming from my left. And yes, my hair was on fire. I immediately smacked it down. Instinct, I guess. This has never happened to me before. Trying to pretend this is not a big deal. Then, noticed the horrible burning smell as the lady 2 tables next to us screamed at the waitress that she smells something on fire. The whole crew of managers and waiters/waitresses rushing into the kitchen, patrons freaking out, me sitting there staring at my date mortified in shock, and finally, someone next to us notified them of my incident. At the same time, I'm still beyond mortified. Thought this only happened in movies. I had to share on Reddit and ask, what's your most embarrassing moment on a date? Story 1. I was eating pasta with a first date. I sneezed with half a mouthful and spaghetti came out of my nose and just hung there. I shook my head a few times thinking it was my long hair until I realized. As he sat there with his jaw on his lap, I attempted to nonchalantly pull it out with my cloth napkin. I did it, but I gagged the whole time. He said he'd call, but he never did. Story 2. Very embarrassing, but not my fault. I had a dude just straight up refuse to take me home. It was off a dating site, he had picked me up in his car and my cell phone was at 4%. All of these are important factors. So, we went to a sushi place. It went awkwardly awful, evening including him telling me not to get anything expensive, and after dinner, I thanked him and asked him to take me home. He told me to stay longer because I had just got there. I looked down at my phone to make an emergency bailout call. Then, he sees me do this and tells me we can go charge it at his place. He just wants to grab something from there real fast. I say okay, because I'm dumb. So, we go to his apartment, and oops, he doesn't have an iPhone charger like he thought. He starts the old make-out kissing on his bed, and I kindly tell him to take me home. He tells me to chill the frick out. So, being the strong and independent woman that I am, I go out of his room, into the living room, and burst into tears. Not just crying, but sobbing and gasping and generally freaking out and telling him I want to go home. He goes into his room and shuts the door. His roommate comes out, gets me some water, and drives me home. It was so awkward and embarrassing. Worst date ever. Comment. His roomie sounds nice though. Story 3. A guy took me to an AA meeting on our first date. I got called normie or something like that the whole time. I was 16, he was 18. Story 4. A guy asked me out to dinner after a literal run-in at the mall. He slammed right into me. He immediately said I was really pretty and asked if he could take me out. I was flustered, flattened, and flattered, so I said yes. We went to a pub-type place to grab food. He was actually pretty charming. We agreed to split 50-50 before we sat down to avoid the awkward pauses at the end of a meal between strangers. That's fine with me, it really didn't raise any alarms. However, we ended up splitting nachos. We maybe finished half of the whole plate. The convo was pretty decent. He was a bit boring, but nothing to hide in a bathroom over. Once the check came with the waiter, he pulled out a piece of paper, a pencil, and a calculator and announced that I would be paying 63% of the tab because I ate approximately 13% more nachos than he did, even though he barely finished the plate. The waiter snorted and I was mortified. I left $10 on the table and got out of there as fast as I could. Comment. That's freaking horrifying. If you ate 13% more nachos than him, you should be paying 56.5%. Story 5. On my parents' first date, my mom somehow got a blueberry lodged all the way up her nose. She spent a good portion of her date trying to snot rocket it out. Story 6. I was on a date with a guy that I think was already drunk by the time we got there, and since I don't drink, it was sort of weird. Usually, I watch people become drunk, not meet with them when they are already there. Anyway, We were trying to figure out what to eat, and I could not understand a word he was saying. So I just nodded and said, "That sounds good. I could go for that." He asked me if I wanted to have sexy time from behind. Comment: best date ever. Story 7. I was on a first date with a guy I had just met. We went to a sushi restaurant that I frequented. It was awkward to begin with, and then we got our food. The pieces were chopped fairly large, so I was battling with deciding to eat each piece in a whole, stuffing my mouth to the point where I looked like a chipmunk, or biting each piece in half, attempting to bite through tough seaweed and having the remaining bits drop on the plate. Both of my options were fairly unattractive. As I was mid-biting a piece, my date looks at me, starts laughing hysterically, and asks, "Having trouble?" As I look up at him with a monster slice hanging out of my mouth, the half that should have fallen on the plate ended up falling down my shirt. Mortified, I slammed my chopsticks down and scrambled to put my hand down my shirt to get the runaway. Needless to say, he didn't politely avert his eyes and pretend he didn't see anything, but instead continued to laugh. Instead of never taking me on a date again, he took me to another sushi place on our next date. Story 8. Not really that bad, but I went on a date with a guy, and since it was a first date, I thought it would be casual. He didn't say where we were going. I meet him at the address he gave me, which turned out to be a really nice restaurant. He's dressed up all nice, and I'm in jeans and a Marilyn Manson t-shirt. I wanted to die. I was so embarrassed. I had to sit through the whole meal while he stared at Manson's face. He joked later that he was admiring the twins, but I think he was just trying to be nice. The second date, I dress up, and we have an outside casual date. Comment: well, that's pretty much his fault for not being clearer. How do you not just say, "I'll be taking you somewhere nice," when someone asks you out? Story 9. Went on a date with a guy. He took me to McDonald's, which kind of sucks because I only eat fish, no other meat, and absolutely no fast food. No big deal, I thought. Fish sandwich. My mom drives us there and gives me $3 to cover for me just in case. He takes 10 out the ATM and we order. Turns out he worked there and got a discount. Used my $3 to pay for both our meals, kept the 10 and my change, and had my mom drive us to his house to eat in front of his family. Awkward. Turned out to be super religious and partially crazy. Story 10. I was really nervous on a first date when I was 17. We were driving in his car to the movies and I got this sudden, horrible feeling, and I asked him if he could pull into some parking lot for a moment. He gave me a weird look and said, "Okay," and as soon as the car stopped, I opened up the door, bent out of the car, puked up what felt like everything I'd eaten for days, wiped my mouth, closed the door, and said, "Sorry, I had to get something off my chest. Let's go." Story 12. On my parents' first date, my mom fell down a flight of stairs, tearing her dress up in the process. Then they went into the restaurant and she spilled a glass of wine on herself. My dad says he loved it because he felt afterwards as if he might have a chance with her. They married some 8 years later. Story 13. I went to my date's house before he drove me out to dinner. He had a very hyper golden retriever and I was wearing a short skirt. The dog bounded over and basically ate me out right there in the doorway. My skirt was completely flipped up and my date was like trying to grab the dog's muzzle and pull it out of my crotch. Comment: isn't this how most bestiality fetishes start? Answer: hey, who knows? It might have felt good if it wasn't associated with so much embarrassment. Story 14. My date poured an entire soft drink on me while he was telling a story with his hands. He proceeded to get up, crawl under the table, and wipe sticky drink from between my toes while everyone in the restaurant watched. I kept telling him that I could do it, but he insisted. Nice, but definitely embarrassing. Comment: it was all a ploy. He just had a foot fetish and wanted to get down there. Story 15. On my first date with my boyfriend, this was 9th grade and we were both awkward, we were sitting and waiting for our parents to pick us up from the movie theater. He wasn't allowed to date, so he always waited for my parents to come first before he called his. So when my dad pulled up and I stood up to leave, he asked me for a goodbye hug. I bent over to hug him where he sat on the bench while he simultaneously stood up, ramming his shoulder into my throat. I coughed really loudly and made gagging noises. He thought I was making fun of his cologne. We didn't even realize the misunderstanding until we talked about it a few months after we'd been dating. We've been going out for over 4 years now. Story 16. Okay, this is about to get real. I had been dating this guy for a while, and the night he asked me to be his girlfriend was the night we had sexy time for the first time. It had been a while since the last time I got laid, so things down there were a little tight. Basically, he ended up ripping me, causing severe bleeding and excruciating pain. I was hoping it wasn't bad enough to notice, but right after we were finished, he got up and turned the bathroom light on and said, I think you started your period. Then I had to awkwardly tell him what really happened. The next day, I had to go get stitches. Comment. In that situation, it is 100% acceptable to say, my private part is tearing. Please stop because I'm in excruciating pain. Most guys probably care more about your welfare than not getting laid for a day or two. And you indirectly compliment him on the size of his package. What embarrassing things have happened to you on a date? Tell us in the comments. That's all for today, folks. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.